There's a massive labor shortage globally and people wanting to do supply chain work because it's just not that attractive in a digital world. In the US, there's 450,000 manufacturing jobs that are unfilled for over 6 months. We need to be really considerate about how we augment and automate people out of work because we still want productivity to increase. We went out on a ride along with a truck driver. From talking to him and watching how he went about his day, there were some things that jumped out at me that I just couldn't believe. And it got me really thinking. It's one thing to optimize and bring efficiency for a company's bottom line, but how do we tie together these kind of three pillars: financial efficiency for a company, emissions reduction and sustainability improvements, and then improvement of the workforce life and job on a day-to-day basis? And that became our real driving purpose.
Richard, welcome to the Decisions That Count podcast.
Thanks for having me, Michelle and Shawn. It's great to be here.
It's, we're really looking forward to today's conversation. There's actually lots of different angles that we're going to talk about today, from the company itself, the technology, to thinking in systems, to your own personal journey and kind of the decisions that have shaped your own destiny. It's going to be a good one.
Yeah, it's no pressure.
No pressure.
No, definitely no high stakes when you feel destined to be doing what you're doing. But that's actually a fortunate position to be in if you feel like it's destiny.
Oh, powerful. I love that. I'm here for that. Okay, so actually, Richard, let's take us back to that moment. So you've just walked away from a company where your work was taken. How did you decide to start again? That decision in itself is hard. And why build something socially and environmentally positive this time?
Well, as you being experts in decision science, there's so much of an emotional component to the decisions that we make, and the ability to logically analyze a situation and slow down and think of things critically to make a decision sometimes just isn't in the cards. And so when I walked away from, my 15-year career in medical devices, it was a spur of the moment decision. It was an emotional reaction to a situation that I was in where I just decided I was better off emotionally letting go than I was trying to hold on. Very difficult decision to make at the time, but, again, when you follow your instincts, sometimes the decision almost feels like it's made for you. The next step after you make a decision like that is obviously a lot more decisions that you have to make. And for me, it was around, do I continue in medical devices? Do I continue in the thing that I've done? Or do I try something new? And I think, people's lives have a way of coloring the current circumstance that they're in. And for me, I was, in my late 30s and hadn't had kids yet, but it was coming. It was in the cards very soon. And I decided that if I was going to start my own venture well and truly that I could have for my very own and fully control it, now was the time. Otherwise, once I got a little bit further down that path of family building, I would probably not have the courage to do it. So I think that combination of emotions and practicality and pragmatism about my own life and where I wanted it to go were very important in understanding how to make the right decision for me and for my family and for our future. And once you make that decision that you do want to try something on your own, I always recommend to people to try and imagine that they're going to be in this business for a long time, because anytime someone starts a startup or any new venture, it always takes longer than they think. And I certainly am no exception to that rule. So you have to envision something that you're going to be happy to get up and do the hard work every day for years. Now, is that always the case? No. Sometimes people have a 2-year success in an AI business and they sell it immediately in happy days. But the majority of people that start their own business are in it for years and years. So it has to be something you're passionate about. It has to be something that you feel like is going to motivate you. And so for us, my co-founder and myself, it was really about two things. It was about being socially positive and being environmentally positive. Now, I could have ticked both of those boxes in medical devices. I could have ticked them in a number of industries, but along our journey, we ended up in logistics optimization in an unexpected way. So, but that was the criteria, and that's why we made those decisions.
Great story. I mean, a lot of people, I think, forget that like the most successful entrepreneurs tend to be like, we think startups are for young people, but they're not. The most successful companies tend to be, because I also have young kids now. And sometimes you think like, why am I starting this now? When my life is the busiest, and the hardest to do. And Michelle, you have a very similar story from walking away from a big corporate as well, right? Which you should touch on. Rich, maybe what I love about your story is like you're also, I mean, logistics maybe doesn't sound as exciting to everybody, but to me it's fascinating because you're at like the forefront of what it means AI in society right now, right? Because we are in this massive AI zone. We don't really know what it means for humans and how it's changing the world. And you're connecting these two. It's a human problem and a machine problem maybe. And how, when you started this business, were you thinking of that intersection? Were you thinking just about changing human, just machine? How did you get led to where the company is now at this really exciting point in not just your industry, but every industry?
It's a great question. The origin story was really around optimizing people's commutes. It really had nothing to do with logistics initially. It was around the amount of time that people spent traveling to jobs that they could be doing closer to home. Now, in a pre-COVID world, that was a very different concept than what it is now. And we explored some different applications of optimization algorithms to commuting. And the business case just wasn't working the way that we wanted it to. So we pivoted to logistics because we met some people from one of the Coca-Cola bottlers down here in Australia. And they said, oh, well, the concepts that you're working on are really interesting, but have you tried applying them to logistics? And we said, nope, we don't have any domain experience in that. We're outsiders, but we'll give it a try. And long story short, we ended up building something really cool and building it for them. But the reason I mention it is because of that human story. And one of the stories that resonated with me so much was in the early days when we were exploring that logistics angle. We went out on a ride along with a truck driver. He was delivering products for a company and, here in Sydney. And from talking to him and watching how he went about his day, there were some things that jumped out at me that I just couldn't believe. One of which was that, he was routinely working 10, 11-hour days. And that was really eating into time with his family and all that stuff is hard work. And we all know that people on the front lines of the workforce are doing hard work. That's not a surprise. But he also hadn't had a holiday, a vacation in over 3 years. And this is a guy with a family, with kids, and he can't take them on even a week away. And we started to unpack why. I started to unpack why just from chatting with him in the cab of the truck. And he said that, look at my truck. There's Post-it notes everywhere with phone numbers all over them. I'm getting calls all day from my customers, the company's customers. And it's just too complicated to give to someone else. He literally felt like the complexity of his delivery routes, and he was absolutely right, could not be handed over to a casual fill-in driver. So he would work when he was sick. He would work, when his kids had something at school that he always had to miss. It was really unfortunate to hear that story. And it got me really thinking about, okay, well, it's one thing to optimize and bring efficiency for a company's bottom line, but how do we tie together these kind of three pillars of financial efficiency for a company, emissions reduction and sustainability improvements for the company, and then improvement of the workforce life and job on a day-to-day basis? How do we tie those things together in a unique way? And that became our real driving purpose.
That's incredible. I love that story. It's like honestly one of the first times that I've heard AI talked about to improve human experience and still helping the bottom line, right? Like you don't really hear that, especially on Wall Street. AI is always like, take jobs, bottom line, productivity. You don't hear about using a tool to actually improve something very human, like seeing your kids. So that's a great origin story.
Yeah, I also just feel like I'd never heard, you don't make those assumptions. Like you think somebody's just driving from A to B and they have a map and a route and that's it. You don't realize that there is complexity in that job. And, for him to take such pride in his work as well, that he felt like he couldn't take that time off. And, it's kind of like, I feel for him, like that's really hard.
He's a contractor, and a lot of the people that we understand in the gig workforce, now he wouldn't be a traditional gig workforce person, but he owns that route. And this is very common in delivery logistics world. You own your route and you get paid based on the amount of deliveries and the amount of product that you deliver. It's fun, actually. It is fun to talk to people about it and blow their minds a little bit because, nobody usually sits there with the Amazon driver and has a chat about what the business model is. You'll have a chat with them about their life and, we'll interact as humans. But there's this entire layer of supply chain industry that most people just aren't privy to and don't understand, nor should they have to understand. But when we all understand that there's real people doing the work and they need some support and some empathy, I think we can all do better by them.
In logistics, one of the biggest challenges that they've got is people wanting to do that role. And what the potential solution is going to be for that in the future. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
There's a massive labor shortage globally and people wanting to do supply chain work because it's just not that attractive in a digital world. People want to be a developer. They want to do knowledge work. And so supply chain is oftentimes a fallback for a lot of people, and not the primary goal. And so what you see is in the US, for example, where there's a lot of good documentation, there's 450,000 manufacturing jobs that are unfilled for over 6 months.
Wow.
There's just not enough people to do the work, which is why, again, when we talk about the human element, I think we need to be really considerate about how we augment and automate people out of work, because that is the goal, is we still want productivity to increase. We still want economies to grow. So automation is a solution to do that. Part of our goal is we use simulation and digital twin technology in our solutions to help people project out a timeline and say, well, look, if we're going to be able to do the same amount of work with a 20% smaller fleet, we're not going to hit that switch overnight. And how do we then make a transition plan to say, here's how we're going to automate out some of our workforce over the next 2, 5, 10, 20 years. You can really project out pretty far depending on how much information you have, and then use that as a guidance to then deal with individual people and individual workforces and locations. So I think there's this convergence of different technologies that is making disruption happen faster. The key ones being AI applied to robotics. And when you start to see the ability of a autonomous vehicle. I was just riding in a Waymo in San Francisco last week. If that's going to be delivering your groceries, and then there's also a sidewalk robot that can get those to your doorstep, suddenly we're going to see some massive disruptions in the labor market, for better or for worse. And we just advocate trying to make sure that they're as reasonable as possible.
I found it really interesting, just the whole kind of digital twin helping the companies make these decisions. Just love to kind of get into that just a little bit more detail. And okay, for maybe somebody who doesn't know what a digital twin is, what is it? And what types of scenarios can you run with it that can help people make decisions in this instance?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you imagine, say, for instance, any item in your room, you look around your room, you see a lamp on the table. Something had to be dug out of the ground. Some trees had to be cut down. Some screws and sheet metal had to be made. And, it all got assembled in a factory. That's then going to go from that original location to somewhere else, either in the same country or overseas, by a ship or a container ship or a plane. It's then going to go to a local distribution center somewhere. It's going to wait until somebody either orders it from e-commerce, or it's going to be sent to a retail store and you're going to pick it up at your local Target or something like that. There's this journey that all of these products go on. And at the atomic level, and I say atomic intentionally meaning like atoms, like at the very fundamental units, that journey is the same for every product. It's stuff that comes from the natural world or recycled or whatever, gets bundled into an item that's useful, and then it gets shipped around until it's used, and then it unfortunately will go to landfill or be recycled or something like that. If you can create a digital representation of that entire journey, and then you can validate that digital representation with historical data, you can use it as a baseline to make predictions for the future. The same way our brains do, right? We learn the patterns in our world. We're pattern recognition machines. And then we use that to visualize the future. And it's funny because, again, this is just a fact that you can debate. You're the neuroscience experts, but I read once that, successful people tend to be more commonly visualizing different hypothetical situations than less successful people. So successful people will run a little simulation in their brain of all the different permutations of things that could happen at a job interview. So they're prepared when they go to that job interview, just as an example. Well, you can think of a digital twin of your supply chain network in the exact same way. What different permutations of that network based on different variables can influence the outcomes, and those outcomes being, primarily financial efficiency, emissions, and all these other things, and labor. That's really the goal of the digital twin, is to provide a really clear platform to then do those experiments, do those quote unquote visualizations using data, historical data and things like that, to then plan for your outcomes. I hope that made sense.
Sorry, keep going back to your story. That was a really good origin story. And with the digital twin too, I mean, it all ties together just because, as you know, in the podcast, we talk about decision fatigue a lot. And any of our listeners know that I certainly think decision fatigue is the most important cognitive disabler of our time. We make too many decisions, which maybe we don't talk about enough, though, is we speak to decision fatigue interrupting or causing you to make bad decisions, but maybe we haven't spoken enough about how it affects quality of life. And studies have been done showing that if you chronically have decision fatigue, it dramatically affects your psychological state, right? You lose you're less happy, you're more prone to depression, you lose even your satisfaction with work. So your whole story and what your company is doing is, I don't know if you've done this before, but I bet you if you use that automation to optimize things, to take some decisions away from the drivers, I bet you're going to see a quality of life change outside of work. Have you guys ever looked at that? I think this impact is actually substantial, because I get stressed out driving normally. Now tried to optimize the route and get the delivery and everything else, right? Have you guys ever checked in that? Has that ever, bottom line and all that? But I would be surprised if you don't see quality of life changes as well.
Honestly, Shawn, we haven't looked at the quality of life component, and that's a really interesting thing that I'm going to take from this conversation as a potential data point to look at. But what we do score is something called drivability. Since GPS became really pervasive, there's been other types of route optimization solutions on the market for the last 20 years, basically, right? But originally they were so bad that they would actually create worse decisions than what the drivers would make, right? It was really kind of primordial technology. And then there's always been this balance between technology advancing and getting a little bit better, but drivers being suspicious of it. Now we're at a point where finally technology like ours is actually better than what they would do by instinct or by memory or by, even years of training. A driver will know that even if they have to go a little bit farther, but they have to take 3 left turns, equivalent of taking 3 right turns in the US, might be faster than taking 1 big turn over a 4-lane highway or something like that, right? So the technology didn't used to be able to do that stuff, and the drivers would constantly be at odds with it. Now the technology does it. And so what you see is this drivability component where the decision that our solution makes is better or equivalent to what they would do naturally, does exactly what you said. Now it's taking decisions off their plate because they trust it. Before they trusted it, it wouldn't take decisions off the plate because they'd always be questioning it, right? But as soon as you achieve a level of maturity in the technology, whether it's AI based or not, where you trust it implicitly, now you are reducing the cognitive load of that driver. And we even see that with our customers to the point where the driver doesn't even know the entire route for the day. They only literally see what the next stop they're going to is, but they trust it so implicitly that they're going to have a nice 8-hour, 9-hour day. It's going to be on time. They're going to finish when they expect, that they trust the technology to that level. They don't actually need to think about the entire day's worth of work.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think the reality is that cognitive load you're unburdening, there's a cost to it. And you're helping with that cost, which has massive implications.
What it doesn't leave time for is those moments of human connection that are often like really important. You know, having those little kind of moments for human connection. If you optimize everything within an inch of its life, then you are missing those moments that are also really important for the brain and for connection and longevity. And I'm sure kind of Shawn to allude to those things. I don't know how you would bake those in.
Well,
I'm just kind of wondering.
To your point, Michelle, I mean, I'm not an expert in this, but I have people who follow things like the Pomodoro technique, right? Where it's these scheduled breaks to try and allow your brain to recover. And so, you know, when you're doing focused work, you work for 20 minutes, take a 5-minute break. You know, I don't do that stuff myself, but I hear about it a lot. And to your point, I mean, I think anytime I get stressed out just, you know, on like a 3-hour road trip with the kids. You know, driving to the beach or something like that. You know, after 3 hours driving in the car with people yelling at you and stuff, it's just like, yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot in your brain. So to your point, you know, if you can just have more predictability, and then the breaks are built into predictability because you have a minute here and there to have a chat with somebody, that can, I would suspect, I would guess, make a huge difference to your quality of life generally and how much you like your job.
We need to think about, you know, as humans, what's the point of AI? And the point of AI should be to make our life better. And I think, Rich, you've in our notes and previous discussions, I know you talked about your triple wins, right? Maybe you want to go into that because I think it covers the people aspect, which is very unique and I think important for so many people to understand what you're chasing with AI. Yeah,
it's really about the 3 Ps. We sometimes call it profit, planet, and people. And so we're looking at companies who will not be nudged, unfortunately, for no judgment, but they will not be nudged to do things for planet and people. They will do things for profit. They'll do things for efficiency. And I'm not trying to sound cynical. I'm just trying to sound like a realist because I work, you know, I'm in a place right now, literally, we're physically located in a clean tech hub. And there's so many great companies here that are duking it out, trying to get people to invest in sustainability and clean energy. And if they're a bit too, if they're a bit too naive about it, oftentimes they're just wondering why nobody's buying what they're selling. And you have to realize that you're adherent to shareholders and the real world, and it's run by dollars. That's okay. That's just accepting the world that I live in and realizing that if I want to influence people and I want to nudge behavior towards planet and people, we have to do it with a financial lens. And so we tie those things together. And what we've learned through this journey is we talked a fair amount about the people, right? And how this technology can help the individuals to benefit. But what we've also learned is that optimization, pure software optimization, no physical resource changes per se, can be one of the most efficient carbon abatement methods on the planet. And the reason is because the transport industry globally will be the largest emitting sector by 2030. The reason is because the grid, you know, around the world is decarbonizing, and there's been a lot of investment in that. But transport has always been the second largest emitter, and it'll be the largest emitter as the grid decarbonizes. So commercial transport is about half of transport's emissions. Of transport's commercial emissions, road transport, so excluding rail, air, and sea, is about 70 to 80%, depending on the country. Okay. So you've got currently now road transport being an absolute outweighed share of emissions. So we saw those numbers and go, okay, cool. You know, people ask us all the time, well, what about airplanes and what about sea and what about rail and all that? Those are all very valuable things that you want to optimize. But if we're going to really attack sustainability, we're going to focus on road freight. That's where the low-hanging fruit are. And, you know, when you look at here in Australia, articulated big rig trucks, so your 18-wheelers, as you might call them in the US, or articulated lorries in the UK for Michelle, that's only 1% of the vehicle population, but it's 15% of the emissions. So again, there's this low-hanging fruit, outsized impact that commercial transport has on emissions. So we said, okay, cool. If we can help people reduce the amount of vehicles that they need, have them run fuller, even if they keep them as diesel, they don't transition to EVs, which we do as well. But even if they don't, if they keep them as diesel, you can dramatically reduce the amount of emissions for the same amount of work done. And until we can really address that, we haven't really attacked the low-hanging fruit, and it's a low-cost way to decarbonize. Then, of course, some companies are going to race and do that much better than others. Then we start to have the conversation around, okay, cool. How do you transition into lower emissions vehicles? How do you transition into electric, hydrogen, hybrid, whatever's appropriate for the use case? But I think the industry generally raced really fast towards alternative drivetrains, low emission drivetrains, electric and hydrogen, and missed the brief that a lot of these fleets are running 40% empty. So if you can address that problem first, you don't even need to buy new vehicles yet.
Yeah, that's a great point. I didn't know any of those numbers at road traffic. And is it something that keeps exploding because like Michelle orders something to be delivered every day?
Yeah, it's your fault, Michelle.
At least.
As do I. As do I.
As do I.
Like, there's this expectation now that like, I want it now, right? Like, I want it delivered to my place tomorrow. And I don't see that disappearing at all. And that's obviously road traffic. So is this one of the drivers? Is these on-time delivery to personal homes? Is that a big component?
Look, yeah, it's e-commerce generally.
Crazy. And up to 40%, sorry, just to highlight that number. Some of these fleets may be that empty for delivery.
That's the average in the UK and Australia. I think in the US, it's a little bit lower.
That's the average? It's not like a peak?
No, that's the average. That's the average. And think about it this way. I'll give you a really easy example that your audience can get behind, right? The Amazon van leaves the depot full. They deliver all the products, and then what do they go back with? Nothing. So there's a whole constellation of technologies and other startups and things that are trying to address that problem as well. That's a scale problem for every industry, because if it's a food distributor going to manufacturing plants, if it's farms and agriculture, if it's bulk goods and furniture, the same problem generally exists across the entire industry. They go out, they deliver a bunch of stuff. They might pick up a few things, but those tend to be separate fleets. So if you average that all together, vehicles are running about 60% full or 40% empty on average.
It's never even thought, but of course, right? It delivers, but it's got to get back. Really interesting. And again, but and this is where you come in and optimizing those routes and the return and everything else is.
We talk about decisions, right? So the state of the art for a lot of those fleets, right? Especially if they do want to be more efficient, if you have a bunch of big trucks, they've got somebody who, again, is behind a desk manually making decisions. And their job is super hard, saying like, oh, okay, well, we're sending this truck full of milk out to deliver to these stores. Can I pick up some pallets of other stuff on the way back? But where is that? And how many pallets is it? And is it for a competitor? Because I don't want to do it if it's for a competitor. And, there's this massive manual decision process that people in warehouses all over the world are doing every day to try and become more efficient. But because it's so manual, it's very hard at scale. Perfect for AI to do it for them. Mm-hmm.
I was just about to say, like, what is a potential future solution for that? Is it to get the whole world on one logistics platform and let AI take over it? What does that look like?
Ooh, yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is a massive challenge. The fact that it is a competitive industry and margins are really low. In Australia, we actually have an enormous insolvency rate amongst transport companies right now, because fuel prices have gone up so much, labor prices have gone up so much. So companies are folding, and it's very competitive, which means that they will not accept one logistics platform for all, because that will reduce their margins and it'll reduce their competitive levers. So that's definitely a world of startups and technology that are trying to do that problem, to solve that problem, but it's very hard. But this is where we talk about agentic AI as the next wave of AI coming, which we're actively investing and developing in, because if you imagine where you can actually have AI agents that can make decisions about your profitability as much as they can about your efficiency. Okay. So we were working on a project in North America, and a medical distributor that sends out all sorts of different types of medical products, different prices, different margins. And they wanted to understand what happens when snowstorms disrupt their deliveries. And typically they have to prioritize stuff that's for upcoming procedures. So medical equipment that needs to get there for a procedure. Okay, cool. You prioritize that first, but then what do you prioritize second? Well, a human will prioritize whatever the volume indicates is the best thing. How many more deliveries can I get around this disruption? But the real answer should be, what is the maximum amount of money and margin I can make? What's the profit that I can make today with this disrupted network? That's where an AI agent can make much better decisions, because they can be dynamically calculating the margin for each of those products on the truck and then prioritizing delivery to the ones that make sense to maximize the revenue and the profit for that day. So that is a game changer for a company like that, where rather than just struggling to get through the day on a disrupted day like that, they can actually just adjust on the fly and say, well, look, today was the most money we could have possibly made considering the disruption. Shareholders should all be pretty happy about that. And that's just one example of many, many different permutations of how an AI agent could make beneficial decisions that a human just wouldn't have the decision capability to do.
That's like, fascinating. And to be fair, like, you know, trying to kind of build a company now, I would use that for sure. But there's also this human side of me that's like, what about the human element needed in those decisions, if it's needed at all, right? So it's like you've got medical equipment that needs to get to certain places. And yes, you should do it by procedure. Then what comes next, right? Like, okay, we know that there's a shortage of this drug at this hospital. That hospital desperately needs this drug or this equipment, you know, but it's going to be the least profitable for the business. You know, where's the humanity like in this? You know, if we hand this over, you're gonna lose that. And I'm torn, because there's this business side of me that's like, yeah, that'd be awesome, you know, we can present to investors, that'll be great. But then there's this side of me that's like, but that's not good for the greater good.
I totally agree. And that's why there needs to be guardrails and human influence and human in the loop on those things too, to train the agents and AI generally to prioritize the things that are human first, and then everything else is gravy, right? Everything else is upside. So, you know, in that example, it is a situation where you prioritize the things for people that are waiting for a procedure, or if there's a shortage of drug. And you can programmatically do that with AI as well, to say like, look, you know, a lot of those companies have what they call, you know, service levels. And so, you know, I've got a patient that needs a device or a drug or whatever. And so you're going to prioritize that. And then you just let the AI loose on everything else.
There's no way, though, that like business owners and leaders are not going to switch the humanity off. Like, you know, there are, you know, yep. I know there are going to be people that are going to go, I don't want the humanity, I just want the profit, you know? I don't know what the answer is.
No. And look, this is something that I'm also actively involved in conversations around the regulatory frameworks of AI. I don't, you know, it's such a hard balance being a business owner and pro-commerce and, you know, calling yourself a capitalist, but then seeing the potential risks and implications of AI in situations like that. And look, you know, there's a reason that I moved from the US to someplace like Australia, because I do believe that government and regulation have a role in guiding these types of technological transitions. That's just my personal belief, and people are welcome to disagree with me. But I think, to your point, if we want to really protect each other from technology, we need to build in guardrails and expected codes of conduct as well, like standards to hold each other to, where we call that type of behavior out and say that that's not appropriate. That's not an ethical way of doing business, and we should expect better of each other.
And this comes down back to the people and the planet, you know, looping kind of background to your 3 Ps, you know,
which is why, you know, I'm glad that I even have a voice in the conversation, because I feel like if people who don't have any, I don't know, desire to look after people and planet are the only ones with the keys to the technology, well, you're just guaranteed to have disaster. Whereas if there's some people who have their eyeballs on that, we can at least try and influence the conversation.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it. And I mean, I always go back. We always just have to ask, like, what's the point? Right. And humanity is such an exciting part that we're becoming so detached from survival, right? Like, it's not about just living anymore. Of course, there's a lot of places in the world that we still are struggling with it, but we need to make hard decisions about like profitability, or I think happiness and quality of life should be a required metric for a lot of this stuff as well. And I would still call myself a capitalist. It's just there's so much happening right now because I think there's so much room in the entire system to start looking at that as well. So yeah, Rich, I expect there'll be a study published from you guys showing how the system also improves quality of life, because it will. I bet a lot of money on that it's in addition to all the other things that what you've developed does for the company. I bet you're going to see happier people, happier drivers, and take it real personal. Better parents, better dads, better kids. All of that's gonna happen.
It's funny you mentioned that because I was just on a call with a customer earlier, and then he sent me a text message saying, "You're my best friend now." And it's just those little things that I think, especially when you're a startup or scale up and you grow in your business, and you wonder, do people actually get value out of this software, the solution beyond the normal thing? But then you put a smile on somebody's face, even on a one-off anecdote, and it can make your day, right?
Oh, totally. Imagine that impact that you guys may have, like way outside of someone's like, "Well, your system made me a better parent." Like, what? Like,
unreal.
You did, AI for optimization of delivery routes, but now you're a better parent. Like that's the cool thing about all this is it can go so deep and fundamental because that cognitive load you're relieving them, it has a cost, right? And they should be putting that cognition to their kids, to being happy, to all those other things. Even like you said, just driving. Now they're not stressed about what route to take. They can start to think about other things that are more enjoyable. So yeah, it's really cool. I think there's a lot of more potential, and it goes deeper than, well, obviously you've thought through all this, but I got really excited from this call just because I think it's the impact can be felt for a long period of time, right?
Yeah, thanks for saying that. It is one of those things that, you get up every day, you do the work, and you hope that people benefit from it. But we've been always very excited about the return on investment ratio that, our little team, it powers millions of deliveries for thousands of drivers. And so our little crew, in terms of the impact that we can create, if everybody was able to replicate that, or thought that way of, like, what are the little things that I could do that have this ripple effect that can improve things? You might not see it. You'll never get feedback on it, but you have to have a bit of faith in your destiny or whatnot, whatever you might want to call it, that it's at least putting the right energy out in the right direction.
Before kind of we wrap things up, I think there's, I actually wanted to come to you personally and your approach to decision overload. I think you've called it systems and compartmentalization. What does that mean, and how can listeners apply that?
I remember vividly still one of my bosses when I was younger in engineering, and he just like had his hand like this. He was rubbing his eyes. And he said, "I just can't make any more decisions today." And that was my first kind of eye-opening, because I wasn't in management. I was just kind of, junior engineer or whatever. But it was my eye-opening to being like, oh, yeah, there is this real cost to being a manager, and having to make all these decisions all day long. And when I got into project management, I started to feel that pain and realizing, oh, geez, every day, all day long, people are coming to me with problems that I need to solve, and I need to make multiple decisions to solve these problems. And I don't mind it, but it depletes your energy really dramatically. So for me, I try to compartmentalize those into just time buckets, meaning that I'm not the person, and this can vary. You guys again would know maybe the neuroscience on difference between people, but for me, I'd rather have 6 super intense hours at the office and then completely check out and turn off my phone for like 2 hours and spend time with my kids and do bedtime and whatever, and then sign back in or whatever. But I feel like it's the context switching that also sucks a lot of the energy out of me. It's trying to feel like you can multitask and manage multiple decisions or the process of making multiple decisions at the same time, which seems like a fallacy to me. I'd much rather just tuck in and get through whatever I need to get through and then move on to the next thing, because it's that. Does that make sense? The context switching back and forth that makes what's already a very intense decision-making process even harder if you can't just get to it.
Yeah, I mean, science would support what you said. So I think the general school of thought now in neuroscience is the brain can't multitask. It just doesn't do it that way. You actually switch from doing one thing to another thing to another thing. You're not capable, your brain's not capable of true multitasking. So context switching is incredibly draining. So yeah, the habits that you've developed, it's interesting you say like decisions and energy, like what you're describing is decision fatigue. And what we find again and again with high performing, people and executives like yourself is they've tried to develop, or they have developed habits, mechanisms, procedures to try to deal with this condition of decision fatigue. Because yeah, everything you described, there's a neurological reality to it. And it's not, again, I always highlight, it's not a psychological failing. It's not like your willpower. It's actually a physical limitation, just like a muscle when running a marathon, right? So yeah, everything described is scientifically, as far as we know, accurate for where the state of the field is.
And so all the more reason that we should just not expect ourselves to multitask, right? Just relieve ourselves of the burden of expectation, because I still see people do it all the time. In business especially, they think that they can manage multiple things at the same time, and doesn't seem to work out.
Yeah, no, they don't. And people very much underestimate how long it takes your brain to re-engage in a task. Like a study came out and just like a ping notification on our cell phone, right? Like just seeing that come up, even the sound or the banner on your phone can actually cognitively throw you out of a situation for like 45 minutes.
Wow.
Right? You don't think you're just a notification. You're just like, oh, like I ping it, but actually it can throw you out for that length of time. So your brain is very bad at doing multiple things at once. Even though we think that we can, or there's an expectation that we should. Brain just doesn't work that way.
And our technology is reinforcing that expectation by constantly barraging us with information that thinks we should prioritize, right?
Michelle's the exception to every rule I just said, because she's an absolute weapon to do everything all at once. And when we started working together, we had all these productivity things, and it's just like ping, ping, ping. And only after like a year did she tell me that she silences her own pings. So I'm the one who's trying to struggle for thinking I'm inadequate. But technology thinks is more, whereas it's actually not. We're not doing our best thinking. We're not making our best decisions when we're constantly inundated with all that information. So with Michelle being the exception. Yeah.
Michelle, we're not worthy. Teach us your ways, please, Sensei.
I'll send you the list of drugs I take at the end of this call. It's like, you could give me I'm the first one. Like, give me an implant. Just take my money. I'll try anything just to get me to be just like 0.1% more productive. I'm here for it. Very last question. I know we didn't go into your story at the beginning, and I don't necessarily think we need to too much, but I think for anyone who is maybe facing burnout or betrayal, to the point where everything just feels broken, what would you say to them as someone? I think you're a third time founder now. Like, what would you say to them to help them make their next decision count?
Definitely get the support that you need. Get the support structure around you, whether it be family, friends, a counselor, whoever you need to make you feel like you're not alone in that decision. Because I think the more stressed out you get, and in that situation where you talk about where you feel like you've been betrayed or somebody has done wrong by you, it can be very isolating. It can be very difficult to separate your emotions from from what you should do to go forward and correct the situation or to recover from it. And so for me, I was very fortunate that my wife was very supportive, and I had a couple of friends that I could talk to, and I did go and see a counselor, and I'm very open about telling people that too, because it was, one of the darkest times for me emotionally. And I'm like a super optimist. I'm not the type of guy that gets down very easily. And so for me to be that low was very weird and uncomfortable, and I didn't like it. And so I said, what do I have to do to get back to feeling the way that I like to feel? And so whatever support structure you need to get through those times, I recommend, people just to be open-minded to that and don't hold it all inside and try to think that you need to carry it on your own. So that's another secret, I guess, of life that people forget, is that the vast majority of people are generous and want to help. They're good people all around you all the time, right? It can feel very uncomfortable to ask for help, but people want to help you. And so just be, maybe one of the most brave things you can do for yourself is to ask for that help.
I love that. Like, that was just such perfect advice in my eyes, and a really nice way to kind of finish this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks for that,
Shawn. Anybody?
Nice.
No, I think that's fantastic advice. Society, I think, sometimes pushes us further apart, and we just need to be brought back that, like, we're all pretty similar. We're all pretty generous and willing to help, and we generally want the best for other people, even though it doesn't necessarily feel like that. So that's a great statement. Mm-hmm.
Mm. So I honestly didn't think a conversation about logistics was going to be this heartfelt. And I felt that from when we had the kind of pre-call, I was like, no, this is going to be a really special conversation. Not that I don't think many people are going to believe it until they hear it and they see it. But I'm sure kind of our audience will agree that this has just actually been a really, really amazing conversation. So thank you so much for coming.
And thank you for the venue to talk about these things. It's great to be able to unpack the reality and what real life really is, which business, personal life, it's all the same. We're all just people trying to navigate different phases. So yeah, great to have a really candid conversation like this. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Rich. It was really enlightening for me. I think what you guys are doing is what every company in AI in this very difficult question of human and machine and whatnot, I think you're on the right track for all of it. So I hope a lot of other founders and listeners kind of know that you can do this and you can focus on people and the planet, and you can still make a difference for the bottom line. So I think it's an important message to keep shouting to the world that we can do this, and it can be good for everybody.
And thank you to you both for looking after our brains, because, we need all the help that we can get to keep doing this stuff.
Yeah, to make good decisions.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to link to all of Rich's profiles below, Adiona as well. I do just want one last question just before we go. Adiona, am I saying that right?
Yeah, well done.
Adiona. There we go, pause. Just tell us where that name came from.
Oh, yeah, of course. We got to circle back around to that. So Adiona is the Roman goddess of the return journey. So her and her sister were responsible for making sure that school children got back and forth to school safely. They were, really influential in Roman mythology. And we felt like that was a perfect, convergence of what we're trying to do and making sure that there's something that's bigger than the sum of its parts.
I love that. Such a beautiful name for our company, and just so aligned with your mission. So I loved it. Okay, and then everyone still listening, like I said, we'll link to Rich below. Comments, questions, ask them, please. We'll get back to you. Let us know what you think of this episode. We'll be back next week with another episode, Decisions That Count. And thank you very much for listening. Bye.